It's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che, here to provide you with the latest. Let us begin with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye's East Africa tour continues. Meeting with their Kenyan counterparts, she will discuss improving cooperation in a number of topics, including economy and development, security and counterterrorism, and also touch on the North Korea nuclear issue. North Korea launches another mid-range ballistic missile, but it explodes on takeoff. News of the latest in a series of failed Musudan tests comes as the regime's top official Lee Soo-young makes an important visit to Beijing. Hyundai Merchant Marine gets the green light for a debt recast plan from its major creditors. This comes after Korea's second-largest shipper held fruitful negotiations with foreign ship owners to bring down its chartering fees. We start with President Park Geun-hye's East African tour, now in its final leg in Kenya, the biggest economy in the region. She is set to hold summit talks with her counterpart Uhuru Kenyatta. Interestingly, it was their parents that met and began the two countries' diplomatic ties. Song Ji-sun in Nairobi starts us off.
Kenya, the largest economy in East Africa, is also Korea's biggest trading partner in the region. The transportation and economic hub also functions as a gateway to enter the entire continent, as well as the European and the American markets. Kenya is vying to emerge as a new industrial nation with its Vision 2030 for growth, and President Park's visit to Nairobi will be focused on laying a foundation for Korean businesses to enter East Africa. In exchange, Korea will share its knowledge in the e-government, ICT, and health sectors. And President Park will also ask for Nairobi's cooperation in implementing the UN sanctions on North Korea, with the hope that it will encourage other African nations to follow suit.
The two sides will discuss ways to enhance economic and development cooperation, anti-corruption initiative, anti-terrorism, and also touch upon regional issues, including North Korea's nuclear issue.
President Park has a full day ahead with a summit followed by a business forum and a cultural event. She'll also check how the Korea Aid Development Program will run in Kenya and stop by the UN office here in Nairobi, which is the United Nations headquarters in Africa. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Nairobi.
Staying on the topic, the president's trip to Kenya is also expected to elevate the two sides' economic cooperation to the next level. Kim Min-ji highlights the potential of the Kenyan market and where the two countries stand in terms of economic relations.
Kenya is East Africa's economic heavyweight. Thanks to its favorable geographic location and gateways, such as the port of Mombasa and Nairobi Airport, Kenya is considered a hub from which to make inroads into other parts of Africa. Kenya also plans to build a railway to connect it to neighboring countries like Uganda and Rwanda. And for its array of IT startups and large pool of entrepreneurs, it's also been dubbed Silicon Savannah.
If you look at Kenya, especially Nairobi, you can see that it's very developed and stands up quite favorably to other major cities. Information technology is well established and the service sector is also relatively active.
With a GDP of $63.8 billion, Kenya is the world's 69th largest economy. This year, it's expected to post growth in the 6% range. However, the Kenyan economy is still heavily dependent on agriculture, which accounts for about a quarter of its GDP. As part of efforts to become more globally competitive, Kenya is pursuing a mid to long-term plan to achieve annual growth in the 10% range through 2030 by fostering 6 key areas, including tourism, IT, and finance, as well as making its political system more efficient. Korea established diplomatic ties with Kenya in 1964, and their partnership has been economically beneficial to both sides over the years. Nairobi is Seoul's biggest trading partner in East Africa. Korea's main export items to Kenya include cars and synthetic resins, while Korea imports copper and food from the African nation. More than 24 Korean companies are operating in Kenya, including big names like Samsung and LG. And with the East African country pushing ahead with infrastructure projects, as well as establishing industrial complexes, more business opportunities are springing up. But as promising as it sounds, Korea isn't a front runner.
Korea is late, very late. China has been investing aggressively and has been part of a massive construction project. But if there's something to learn, China hasn't been able to improve the livelihoods of the local people.
While Korea can learn from the mistakes of others, experts say it should not consider China or other advanced countries as competitors. Instead, it should seek ways to work together, which will help Korean companies sidestep political risks and help them attract capital. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. It's another failure for North Korea. Today, the regime unsuccessfully attempted to fire off a Musudan ballistic missile, making it 4 failed launches in under 2 months. The communist state went ahead with the provocative act despite being under the heaviest international sanctions ever imposed on the regime. Kwon Jang-ho has the details.
At 5:20 a.m. South Korea time, North Korea launched a mid-range Musudan ballistic missile from its testing site in Wonsan on the eastern coast of the peninsula. Seoul's defense ministry later confirmed the launch failed, and although an investigation of the specifics is ongoing, its initial findings suggest the missile exploded on takeoff, possibly injuring personnel near the launch site. The Musudan is a ballistic weapon developed by the North that is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. It has a theoretical range of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, making it capable of reaching all of Japan and as far as the US territory of Guam. But since its first attempt to launch the missile last month, the Kim Jong-un regime has had a series of embarrassing failures. So far, 4 missiles have been launched, all ending in failure. The South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff said it's on alert for signs of any additional missile tests and is prepared for any future provocations. And the Foreign Ministry has condemned the launches, saying it's another violation of UN sanctions and cannot be tolerated. Shortly after the South Korean authorities had confirmed the missile launch had failed, there was news that the regime's former foreign minister, Ri Song-yong, had gotten on a plane to Beijing with a large group of delegates. This will be the first time a high-ranking North Korean official has made the trip to Beijing since the regime's 4th nuclear test in January. Ri, recently promoted to vice party chairman, is expected to meet with Chinese leaders, but it's unclear whether it was the missile launch that prompted the meeting and whether it was China that invited the diplomat or it was pre-arranged. In any case, the international community will be closely watching Beijing's response to North Korea's recent actions. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Coming back to South Korea now, on Monday, the 20th National Assembly punched in for work. And today, Korea's 3 main political parties are in talks on filling key parliamentary posts. Park Ji-won has the latest from the domestic political realm.
The deputy floor leaders of Korea's 3 main parties are continuing their closed-door negotiations on who to put forward for National Assembly Speaker and the leaders of the powerful standing committees, especially the Judiciary and Budget committees. In the previous assembly, the ruling Saenuri Party, which had a majority, took the speaker post, while the main opposition Minju Party chaired the Judiciary Committee. However, since the ruling party lost its majority in last month's general election, big changes are expected given the opposition party's strong showing in the April poll. Parties aim to complete negotiations before June 7th.
The negotiations among the deputy floor leaders will continue for a while to meet the legal deadline. We urge the ruling party to make concessions, as we are ready to do that too.
We will do our best to complete the process of selecting the Assembly Speaker by June 7th through mediation.
The ruling Saenuri Party, which is still reeling from its election defeat and long-standing factional feuds, has set the number of members on its interim council at 11. The group will lead the party until July, when new leaders will be elected.
The interim council will have 11 members, including the interim leader. The other 10 will consist of 5 party members and 5 people from outside the party.
Also on Tuesday, the 3 opposition parties, the Minju Party, People's Party, and Justice Party, announced a common stance on 5 major domestic issues. Together, they called for a special investigation into the 2014 Seoul ferry sinking, parliamentary hearings on the toxic humidifier sterilizer scandal that has been blamed for over 100 deaths, and further investigations into the chronic corruption in the legal fields, among other things. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Preparatory Committee tasked with establishing a foundation for the victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery had its first meeting today. But it didn't go off without controversy after the committee chair said the money Japan provided under a landmark settlement cannot be considered compensation. Connie Kim reports.
Korea on Tuesday launched a preparatory committee tasked with establishing a foundation for the victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery, a step toward implementing the landmark Comfort Women deal reached by Seoul and Tokyo in December. Under the agreement, the two countries agreed to establish a foundation for the surviving victims, while Japan pledged an apology and a contribution of 1 billion yen, roughly $9.1 million to help launch the foundation. The committee will set the foundation's direction and prepare to start operations as early as next month. But there's a controversy brewing over how the money provided by Japan should be viewed, as the committee chair's stance appears to go against that of the government.
It's important to find out what the victims want and how to heal their past hurt. The money from Japan should be regarded as healing money, not compensation.
Kim later revised her statement, saying there could be many ways to view the funds and opening the door to other possible interpretations. Government officials had said the money from Japan could be seen as compensation, since Tokyo apologized and acknowledged its responsibility for its wartime atrocities. Seoul's foreign ministry reiterated the stance on Tuesday.
The aid money from Japan is significant in that Tokyo is implementing measures that demonstrate the Japanese government's acknowledgement of its responsibility, as well as its apology and expression of remorse to the women, as stated by Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida.
The launch of the Preparatory Committee is part of Korea and Japan's final and irreversible resolution to the long-standing issue between the two countries, as outlined in the December agreement. But with both the committee and the government avoiding comment on Japan's call to remove the Comfort Women statue in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, questions still remain about whether the foundation will really reflect the voices of the surviving victims. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korea's second-largest shipper, Hyundai Merchant Marine, has finally settled on a debt restructuring agreement with its bondholders. This comes after it made significant progress in negotiations with ship owners to cut its leasing rates. Kim Jung-soo updates us on this much-needed turnaround for the struggling company.
Hyundai Merchant Marine and its major creditors successfully agreed on an initial debt recast plan Tuesday, worth over $200 million. The initial agreement, which was finalized at the Hyundai Group headquarters in Seoul, specifies that 50% of outstanding debt obligations will be transferred to stocks. The other half will be paid off over the span of 3 years, starting from 2018. A direct victim of the downturn in the industry and China's sluggish economy, Hyundai Merchant has been struggling to fight off liquidity problems. But when issues peaked last year, the firm applied for a voluntary workout and joint management program with creditors in March. Korea's number 2 shipper is floundering as it's roughly $4.4 billion in debt, with major obligations coming from shipping finances, corporate bonds, and bank loans. Last year, it posted revenues of $5 billion with an operating loss of over $210 million. Investors say that the company and its creditors reached a mutual agreement because they thought it was a much more preferable outcome compared to court receivership. Officials from Hyundai Merchant Marine said that additional debt restructuring agreements are scheduled throughout the day. A second settlement worth roughly $50 million and a third worth over $300 million are also expected to be proposed to its remaining creditors. Kim Jung-soo, Arirang News.
Korea's overall industrial output fell on month in April for the first time in 3 months. Making matters worse, it dropped at its fastest pace since July of last year. Shin Se-min looks into the numbers.
Statistics Korea says the nation's overall industrial output went down 0.8% in April from the month before, while factory output slid 1.3%. On an annual basis, industrial production in mining, manufacturing, and electricity and gas dropped 2.8%, extending the negative streak to 2 months. Sputtering auto production that plunged 8.7% on year, as well as falling output in the electronics parts and display sectors played a big part in the overall fall. Statistics Korea says a jump in production in the semiconductor and petroleum industries worked to offset what would have otherwise been a much bigger decline. But it's not all doom and gloom. Domestic consumption expanded last month, increasing 4.2% on the back of robust sales of durable and non-durable goods like automobiles and cosmetics.
Domestic demand is good at this time, and the improved leading composite index indicates the economy will pick up smooth recovery momentum in the future.
Production in the service sector grew over 2% on year and 0.5% on month, thanks to the steady stream of Chinese tourists vacationing in Korea.
Considering that there aren't many external factors looming that would hamper both the local and global economy, current circumstances will persist for the time being.
But experts add the potential U.S. rate hike in the coming months may add reason for greater concern down the line. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Seoul is once again promoting its ban on smoking near subway stations, set to go into effect this fall. To raise awareness of the ban, the country's capital designated the first of every month as an awareness day and put up warning signs and posters in crowded stations to inform the public. The city government banned smoking within 10 meters of subway exits earlier this month, and the regulation will take effect in September after a 4-month grace period. Violators will face fines of up to $85. City officials say the ban will help reduce secondhand smoke exposure and encourage smokers to kick the habit. And that brings us to the end of this hour's newscast. As always, thank you for watching.